The broadcast is now starting.
Let's get ready to webinar! Hello, everybody. Oh, happy Thursday. So happy to have you guys here. Thank you so much for joining us for the next episode of the Pixma webinar series and today's offering of top 10 ways Microsoft Teams makes your organization better collaborators. Boom! Oh, it's going to be such a great session today. Very excited to have you guys here. If you've never joined us before for one of our webinars, welcome. Happy to have you. Thanks for being here. We hope you'll stick around for more webinars to come. If you have been here with us before, thank you so much for coming back. Whether this is your second, third, 29th and a half webinar, we're excited to have you. We're happy we didn't scare you off. Some of the little business things that you're probably used to from being on webinars in general. There is a questions tab and a chat tab. Feel free to throw your questions up there. I will be following along. I will be following along the entire time, so I will get your questions in there as best I can. If for some reason we're not able to get to your question in the moment, we do save a little time at the end for Q&A. We'll get to those questions as best as possible. So feel free to speak up. We love answering your questions. It's one of our favorite things. Anyway, enough of me blabbing and yelling and making weird references. Today's speaker is a dear friend of mine. He's also happens to be my boss. He's one of your guys' favorites as well, and he's here to talk about Microsoft Teams. Give it up for Eric Overfield. Take it away, sir.
All right. Thank you so much. Everything's coming in nice and clear. Camera's looking good.
Oh, yeah, you look great.
The deck is looking good. Excellent. Perfect. Thank you. Definitely. Thank you all for joining us. All right. So many of you are using Teams. Many of you are thinking of using Teams. And we use Teams daily. And when it comes down to it, the amount of communication collaboration that Teams has enabled Pixma has just been immense. And I want to share with you a lot of the things that we have found that have helped us become better communicators and collaborators, because let's face it, no matter what size of organization you're in, if you have, well, as long as you're not by yourself, you have more than one person or you have a client you talk to, on up to the hundreds of thousands of employees, communication, collaboration, collaborating together, working together to derive whatever it is that your organization is doing is just often is a huge bottleneck. And I have found that so far in the career that I've had, Teams is actually solving a lot of those problems that we've supposedly have had. I mean, how many of us, when we were working in our offices, we would maybe send an email, or we used to maybe send a Skype message or someone to the cubicle next to us, the office next to us, rather than go and speaking to them for lots of reasons. And we did that too. And I found that Teams helped bring a lot of that collaboration together, where you still might not need to go talk to the person, but you could. More easily. You could have the virtual conference rooms where you can communicate and collaborate a lot easier. They bring this into one platform, and I thought it'd be really cool to say, what can Teams do for you today, in all of the features that are available out of the box. So everything we're going to look at here is really stuff that either you're probably using, but maybe you're not thinking about it a certain way that I might want you to look at to increase your communication and collaboration. So with that, I say we go ahead and get started moving forward. Whoops. Let me go ahead and hit that. Perfect. There we go. So for those of you who I've not yet had the pleasure of meeting, again, my name is Eric Overfield. I'm president, co-founder of Pixma. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I'm a Microsoft regional director. I'm heavily involved in the community around Microsoft Teams, Office 365. SharePoint was where my true story in this whole field really begins. I've written a couple of books. Other ways to get a hold of me at Eric Overfield, ericoverfield.com, of course, at Pixma, Overfield at Pixma.com. Happy to talk to you, happy to chat with you. A lot of my sessions, a lot of my slide decks are all available through my blog, through blog.pixma.com, through Twitter, etc. If you could just remember my name, you could probably find all of the content I've been sharing. And I'd love to communicate with you, talk to you, help answer you the problems you've been running into. And hope to see you somewhere. If you're at a conference, you see my name, hey, come on up to me and say, hey, Eric, nice to meet you. I saw you in one of the webinars. I have this question, or hey, just chit chat. If you have a solution that you want to show off, I would love to see it. I always love to see how anybody is utilizing a technology to solve their organizational needs. Just, totally love to see the demo and see what you have to offer. If you'd like to know more about Pixma, if you're new to Pixma, what we do is we focus on building digital workplaces and digital solutions for our clients built around the Microsoft ecosystem. So in particular, that means Microsoft 365, Azure, Teams, SharePoint, things like that. And our solutions are tailored to our clients. We like to talk to you, to listen to you, to find out what it is you need without asking you that question, because we found most clients don't really know what they need. They don't know what they really want. They think they know. When we get into discovery, we find out, no, probably you were thinking about it wrong. Hey, why don't you do it this way? And then we help our clients implement it. And if you're in that need for building digital workspaces, SharePoint portals, Microsoft Teams, please, we'd love to talk to you. We'd love to hear what you have to say, and we'd love to be able to present to you more about how Pixel may be able to help you. So with that said, got all that housekeeping out of the way, I say we get into it, and let's look to see how is it that Teams can help our organization collaborate better, no matter how large or small of an organization you are. If you're working with other people, you're working with partners, you're working with clients, you're working with just internal people, Teams is likely a really good platform for you to consider. I personally have found it the best, and definitely those that are in the Microsoft ecosystem. If you're working with a different platform for everything else, I can understand you might go with something else. But if you're all touching Office 365, Word, Excel, SharePoint, OneDrive, Azure, any of those, Teams is definitely going to be a spot to look at. So I want to start us with looking at Teams in general, be a quick couple slides, quick couple things about what does Teams do, because that's going to help further the story into the meat of this, which are what are these top 10 features. And if you stick with me here, I actually have a little bonus because I couldn't fit everything into 10. There's just too many cool things. So you might get some extra bonuses here. And then also I want to look at extending Teams. So what could you do if you went past the top 10 out of the box things? What else is possible? How else can you make this platform be your true hub, your true canvas to your organization's digital workspace? So with that, let's just start with the Teams in a nutshell and see what Teams is. Teams itself is only a couple of years old. It's a new platform that was really built from the ground up. So this was a greenfield project from Microsoft where they were looking to, I'll just cut to it. They were looking to compete with Slack a little better. My opinion, no one's told me that. I don't know if Microsoft would agree with me, but that's how I look at it. And I think that it's pretty safe to look at it like that. So Teams is based around having these chat-based communications, really for any organization, large and small. As long as you have more than one person, kind of makes sense. You'd probably collaborate with more than one person. It's hard to collaborate by yourself. Teams is helping to enable that communication. It's focused on where those rapid conversations are happening, where those meetings need to take place, where you've got people in remote locations that want to participate, where you're working with someone externally, you want to have a quick phone call, you want to have a multi-threaded online chat, you want to be able to have video, voice, all that kind of stuff with internal and both external people. If you want to kind of get started with Teams, or maybe you've heard of Teams, you've seen Teams, you're playing with Teams, and you want to see what Microsoft has to say about getting started with Teams in general, I do have a link for you on the slide that will help you give some Microsoft's documentation on what Teams has to offer. Now, Microsoft offers quite a few tools in the communication and collaboration space within Office 365, and so I think it's important to then look at, okay, well, wait a second, how does Teams fit into all of this? And I have sort of a logical hierarchy, not really an age, but sort of how things sort of build together into one thing, and then how Teams fits in in the end of all this is a more of a global pulling things together. So at the root of Office 365, grouping of people is this idea of Office 365 groups. I'm sure you've heard of them. This is around pulling together people where they have two different classifications. You've got owners and members. And this is for bringing together a group of people to be able to collaborate, where they will have a shared email address that will be for that specific group. When you create an Office 365 group, you get a planner. You also get a SharePoint site. Generally, in the Office 365 world, Office 365 groups is underpinning a specific group of people, a collection of people for any given opportunity. So Office 365 groups are there, and there are some tricks with how Teams works with them, but it's definitely important to think about how that is its own thing. And groups do a lot of their own things on their own. Great. A lot of other solutions that are available utilize groups. We have Outlook still, totally cool. Outlook is still there, still strong. Often we talk about kind of Outlook in the Exchange world. It's sort of the same idea. Exchange, of course, is the server. Outlook is the client that we use to get email. We've been using it. I'm sure all of us use Outlook. And Outlook is really good at emailing, of course, and it's where our calendar has traditionally lived. I mean, it's definitely where my calendar has lived for quite some time. Until now, we're going to see that, don't worry. But it's still there, of course. I mean, Outlook is still managing all of that. SharePoint's been around a really long time. SharePoint itself has tried to do a lot of communication and collaboration, and I'm a huge SharePoint fan. Any of you who know me, this is where I've been spending a lot of my time. SharePoint itself, though, it's a website. It's for building portals. It's for building websites, and it's for storing files as well, and it's still good at that. SharePoint attempted to be a place for like threaded discussions through commenting and whatnot, and comments still are there for good reason for certain spots. But SharePoint really is good at storing files. It's for hosting web pages. It's for building a application or an application page on a website, and it's still definitely there. It's still very useful. OneDrive is also a part of this, and OneDrive is built on top of SharePoint. So in a sense, sharing files, absolutely there. Oh, lists and libraries, of course. Lists for sure, where you've got lists of data that you want people to be able to work on. I mean, Excel can do that as well, but in a very different way. If you want it on a web page and you want good formatting and whatnot, SharePoint is a definite go-to place for that. Okay, so now we move on to some of the platforms we used for more one-on-one, one-to-many direct conversations. So we look at something like Skype for Business. Been around a real long time. It's no hidden secret. Microsoft has made it very clear that Skype for Business has been deprecated. Not deprecated, it's going away. It is clearly moving towards this new platform of Teams. And what Skype did really well, it provided our voice and video chats as well as text-based chatting. It had federation where you could have chats with people outside your organization. And it did serve a purpose. We used Skype for a very long time. And I had also provided calling, which you'll notice in my presentation here, I'm not going to be talking about really the calling aspect, the voice over IP aspect of Teams. That is a huge component, but it's not really where I want to go with my specific discussion here. But Skype did provide that for a lot of organizations. Totally get that, and that's moved to Teams. I mean, kind of clearly that's moved to Teams. Okay, Yammer. Yammer is still alive and well. So for a while, people might have thought, oh, Yammer is going away. Not at all. Not much to share here from the Ignite perspective, but so Microsoft Ignite 2019 is happening, if you're watching this live, in just a couple weeks in Orlando. If you don't have a ticket, sorry, it is sold out, but many of us, 20,000+ of us are descending on Orlando, and we're going to get a big overview of the latest and greatest coming out of Microsoft. And if you go to ignite.microsoft.com and you Google you search in the sessions, the word Yammer, you're going to find some really interesting sessions and some interesting session titles. And where I'm getting at is it sure looks to me when I go to the Ignite website that Yammer's getting a lot of love. And so I'm very excited to see where Yammer's going to go moving forward. But what Yammer does is it provides us this great networking place for one-to-many discussions, in my opinion. It's for helping find what Microsoft likes to say is the serendipitous moments of finding people who are, when you're trying to either bring it together in a community or you are looking for someone who might have knowledge in something, Yammer provides a good space for that. And it's kind of Facebook-y, much more than Teams is. We'll get to, of course, what Teams is doing a little bit about it. I'm sure a lot of you know. Yammer provides these community areas to get together, and it's still very useful. I found Yammer heavily used in larger organizations where in particular, where leadership or someone in leadership really embraces this idea of being able to communicate with everybody in a more friendly way, in a more casual way, and it allows just a lot of these simple conversations to happen, these interesting conversations. And one of the things that Yammer can do real well is it allows you to search all of Yammer that you have access to. And it's because of how Yammer was put together from its underpinnings. Whereas when we get to something like Teams, which Teams is really good at the chat-based workplaces where we can have lots of quick chats and quick conversations and video chats, which Yammer's not really for that. Yammer's for more posting a question out or posting something out and then looking for people to have responses, whereas a lot of what Teams is good at is me directly communicating with one person saying, hey, I've got this dev task for that I need solved. Hey, we've got this marketing campaign coming out. Danielle on our team, she's our head of our marketing and sales. Hey, Danielle, what would you, what are we going to do for this one thing? Or hey, I've got this idea. What do you think? And Teams is really good for something like that. It's great for having ad hoc video, our online meetings, and really good for bringing in external people. The catch is that Teams is based around groups. The collection of when you create a team within Microsoft Teams, the underpinning of that is an Office 365 group. And unless you've joined the group, which you can have public and private groups, but even if there's a public group, you actually really can't surface that content very well to go find information that may have occurred, conversations that may have occurred in Teams until you join a specific group. And Yammer doesn't have that. In Yammer, you could basically search anything that you might have access to, even if you haven't necessarily joined that community, again, as long as it's an open community. So hopefully this kind of gives you just a broad overview in case you've have questions, or if your project sponsors are saying, hey, why are we not using Skype, or well, we want to use Yammer instead of Teams. I believe all of these are not really, I want to use one over the other. It's each of these components has a place. Each of these pillars has a place in the organization. Although I am seeing a lot of consolidation personally in how we use Teams, and I think that you might see that as well, and I'm hoping you'll get that out of this conversation. So with that being said, hey, let's do it. Let's look at what I consider for sure some of the top things, and a lot of these will be, I think, review for you. But if you're trying to work with your project sponsors as well, hopefully you'll be able to use this list and go, hey, look what's going on. Okay, so the first 7, I believe, these are things I use daily, if not hourly, if not every minute or so. Because Teams is open all the time on my desktop, and it is definitely where I am able to communicate, collaborate with my organization and with all the clients and external partners I work with. And the root of this really happens in the activity feed. So by default, on the left-hand bar, which I believe is called the left-hand navigation, so appropriately named there in Teams, you have your activity feed. And what I found in general is that when people first start Teams and they open it up, they look at the Teams interface and they're kind of intimidated because it's kind of a little blank. They don't really know what to do, and they see these links on the left, they don't know what to do. The upper left-hand one, activity feed. And the activity feed is effectively, one way to think of it is, it's your Teams inbox. If you are, if you're basically following a channel within Teams, so Teams was broken up into a Teams, I love this, Teams and Teams. Just a little side note. So by the way, whenever you see Teams written, or you're talking about Teams, or you're writing about Teams, or you see Teams written, to me, the most established way of working with Teams within Teams and talking about them is when you talk about capital T Teams, you're talking about Microsoft Teams, the platform. When you're talking about a team, a group of people within Microsoft Teams, that's a lowercase t. So I might try to say uppercase T Teams or lowercase t Teams. That's what I'm referring to. So if you are involved in a lowercase Teams, or you're basically effectively following it, or you set up notifications that you want to be notified anything happens within a specific channel within a team, or if someone were to @mention the team, or if someone were to @mention you within a channel, or or @mention the channel, that's all going to appear in your activity feed. So you kind of see in my little screenshot here in the upper left-hand side of the screenshot, activity has a little 1. And what that means is that there is something has happened that I probably should go look at. I'm asked to have been notified anything happens in that specific channel, or again, I've been @mentioned, or the team has been @mentioned that I'm a member of, or the channel is @mentioned specifically. That will help me get my attention, which is actually then, think about it on the flip side. If you want to get somebody's attention and you want to get their attention in a channel, in one of these threaded chats, there's all these ways that you can do it. You can @mention the team, you can @mention the channel, you can @mention them. Just be careful, because if you start @mentioning a team when all you're really trying to do is get a hold of one person, you're going to potentially really start to upset a lot of people, because everybody's going to get in their activity feed that something happened. Now, when you go into the activity feed, all you basically see is the posts, the things that have happened. So you can see here that, Kunal mentioned me in a specific channel and said, hey, here's this message in this general channel we have in one of our teams called the Pixel team. And I just get, if I click on that, I would then just see the threaded discussion that's happening in that channel. But of course, I would see his post where he mentioned me. And so this is a great way to see what's happening overall. Just because I have that notification of 1, that doesn't mean that the activities that I've been involved in goes away. It's still there. Now, one thing you're going to want to be able to do is you want to control what actually happens here. So you want some level of control. And the way you're going to end up doing that is within any given channel, you can change your notification settings. Basically, the next to any channel, you hover over it, you get a little 3 dots. You click the 3 dots, you can set up your notifications. And there's a couple different ways of getting notified. One is you can basically say, I would like to be notified anytime anything happens in this channel, including anytime anybody replies within this channel. So not only not when I get mentioned, but also when anything happens. And then you can choose between the feed or your banner. Feed means activity feed. Banner means the Windows banner, that pop-up that shows up in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. So you can control how heavily you are inundated with different requests. So use your activity feed. That's, to me, where the important stuff happens. Now, that doesn't mean that the activity feed is the only place to go, because you might, again, set up notifications differently. You might still need to use your Teams tab so that you can see anything that's happening in Teams. But your activity feed, that's the thing that you probably need to worry about most. It's already there, on by default, and you've got it. Take control of it, and you'll have a lot more success with Teams. So the next big way to really facilitate your collaboration with your organization, of course, it is the chats and the chats you can have within channels. And so I've lumped this into one because I really want to split it out, but I had to keep it to 10 according to our marketing requirements here. I wish I could have had 25 different ways, but of course it would have blown everyone's mind and it would have taken me 3 hours. So of course, Teams is really good at having chats. There's 2 main ways to have chats. You can actually have chats with 1 or more people. That's within the Chats tab. That's for having ad hoc discussions with 1 person, multiple people, internal and external people. You just are able to kind of mention someone and you can start chatting with them, and you can have a persistent chat. Great, pretty cool. You can have a video chat with them. You can call them, have a voice chat as well. That can all be recorded. Super cool, super powerful stuff. But you can have kind of chats as well within the channels of a given team. And then within a channel, what you're kind of seeing here on the screenshot is I'm actually having a discussion in a chat with, excuse me, I'm having a discussion within the webinar planning channel that we have with someone on my team, and we're actually reviewing this slide. I'm trying to go over this slide with them and saying, hey, I'm sharing the slide, I'm talking about what I want to add, and I'm able to have that live communication with them, even though we're not in the same physical location. We can have text chats, videos chats, voice chats that works so well. These kind of chats with video go a little bit farther. They help empower virtual conference rooms where we want to pull people together in a conference room, and Microsoft is working hard in this space to build teams for conference rooms. And there's this really cool thing they have that they've been demoing, and we haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen it live. I haven't seen it out in the wild in GA, but I've definitely seen them present this, and this was super cool. There's this idea that in a conference room, you can have this second camera set up, basically this special hardware, that when you are looking at a whiteboard, it is going to help remove the person in front of the whiteboard. So those remote attendees can still see the entire whiteboard. Super cool stuff, and I'm seeing a lot of really great activity here happening for having teams in conference rooms that will, I think, really help larger organizations that have these kind of remote offices and whatnot, where people need to work together. Teams will help empower that kind of collaboration where you basically can remove the barriers of distance and be able to communicate and collaborate directly. And this is all going to happen in chats and channels. Also, you can have external people join in on this, and I think they're super powerful. Now, there are some, not limitations, but there's some hurdles sometimes, some technical hurdles sometimes you need to go over. Some external organizations might have set up teams in certain ways where it might be difficult to bring in external people, or that's controlled. Totally understand all of that. That's an IT pro issue. You're going to have to potentially work with your organization, but teams can do this, which is just super cool to have these kind of chats and communications. Some things I would like to see for sure, some things you want to think about. As of today, you cannot move a chat into a channel. I don't know if that's coming at all, but I can tell you a lot of people have this desire, and I do as well. Sometimes you're having a chat with somebody or with a couple people, and you realize it's actually time to move this into a channel, so it's tied into a specific team or a group of people. Be super nice to do, you can't do that. So what should you do? In general, you should have a chat with somebody or a group of people if it's not associated with a specific topic or a specific a channel within a team yet. So if you just need to have a quick one-on-one with somebody, probably, or it's private just between that person, it's probably not necessary to have it in a channel because you maybe don't want to share that with the group. Totally understand. That's a great place to have a chat. Chat by default is persistent though. So if you're having a chat with somebody, that conversation is persistent. Good and bad, it is what it is. Whereas channels, you should host any kind of communication within a channel when that discussion that you're going to have with even just one person relates around a topic. So as an example, at Pixelmill, we have a channel for every project we're working on. And we might have a lot of people who are involved in that channel because they are all working on this project. But maybe 2 or 3 people need to have a discussion, a voice discussion or video discussion on that specific client project. So where should they have it? Should they create a chat or should they have it in a channel? And my recommendation would be it should be in the channel. So let's just say I'm in on this channel as well, but I'm not needed for the discussion. I would still rather see that team get together and have a recorded video call or something, or a video call within the context of the channel, because that conversation is around that particular client project, let's say, and I would just be notified, hey, you're not needed, or hey, if 2 of us are going to meet here, join us if you want. We're going to talk about client X project, but we're going to have it here. That way, it is still related and brought together around, is kept within that context of that specific discussion, that topic that channel is supposed to be dealing with. So definitely number 2 for me, chats and channels. I use these daily. I mean, multiple times a day. I'm working with my activity feed is my by the minute thing, and I'm working with chats and channels all the time. Oh yeah, okay. I want to show a different screenshot as well. If you actually were looking at a specific channel, and so one of the channels we have at Pixelmill is just a general knowledge sharing channel where we like to share with each other what's going on. If we saw a cool article, or if there's some cool dev thing that we saw, or there's a great new concept around user experience or collaboration, yeah, we'd love to put that in knowledge sharing, and we can see all that happen together. Okay, now there's another thing I'm pulling together, 2 topics I want to pull into one. I've used Outlook for many, many years. I've used the calendar in Outlook for many, many years. I no longer use the calendar. I very rarely use the calendar in Outlook. Instead, I get my calendar in Teams. It's the same exact calendar. I just don't have to use it in Outlook anymore because I'm not spending my time in email nearly as much as I used to, because most of my collaboration occurs in Teams because of my activity feeds, my chats, and my channels. I can now get my calendar here as well. So about a month or so ago, the calendar tab used to be called the meeting tab, and Microsoft renamed it to calendar when they made a bigger calendar view. So you get a nice big view. You kind of see here my calendar. I took this screenshot last night to make it fresh. You can see all these different things that I'm supposed to be doing. That would have been a couple days ago, or Monday. And this is the same calendar I see in Outlook. What I like about this, though, is, one, I don't need to switch context between one app or the other. My calendar exists in my primary digital workspace, which is workspace, which is Teams. So within Teams, I have my activity and my chats. I know who's talking to me. I know that with the Teams tab, I can get into the channels that people are asking for my help, or I can communicate with everyone I need to communicate with. I can now go straight down to my calendar tab to see, wait, what's my next meeting? And in particular, what I like about this is when I need to start a meeting or join a meeting that has been scheduled in Teams, I don't have to go to Outlook, go to the calendar item, and then join the meeting there, because that then flips me over to the browser, which flips me over into Teams. It's all integrated now into Teams. I just have this nice little join button directly in the calendar in Teams. I click that button. Teams already knows that I have a context of that. It loads up the meeting super quick, and I'm off to the races. So that's just the calendar. But of course, you also have meetings as well. You can schedule meetings directly within Teams to have to bring together people. So I know that I need to discuss a client project tomorrow. So I'm going to be able to go into that channel and basically schedule a meeting for that specific group of people and say, hey, tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific, I need to discuss with one of my devs and one of my designers that, hey, we need to discuss this project, and here's what we're going to discuss. And I could do that all within the context of Teams. I can schedule it. I can see it tomorrow. I can join it. But also the meeting is hosted within Teams. We can have all the power of chat and video and voice and all the other cool things that exist. And then just to make it better, just to make it a little better, we can, of course, record all of that. Little record button, boom, I get to record all my meetings. Everybody gets a nice notification saying, hey, by the way, this is being recorded. And then as soon as you're done with that meeting, that recording goes directly into stream. Don't even have to think about it. It gets posted right back into the channel. So easy to be able to have meetings, to schedule meetings, to work within my calendar, and then to get those recordings directly into stream, so now they're available for those that couldn't attend.
Hey, Eric, we had a question come in.
Yeah.
This is from Bonnie. Bonnie, thank you for submitting your question. I have a question about external guests.
Yeah.
Assuming that the IT department hasn't limited anything relative to external guests,
Okay.
what is the difference between what they would see and be able to access versus a regular member?
So it depends how you're going to add them. If you add an external member, external person to a team, they're going to be a member of that team, and they'll have access to everything within that team. So they'll have access to the team itself. They'll have access to the channels. They would typically then also have access to the SharePoint location where the files are stored. But you can also limit that. There's settings within the team level where you can limit a little more on what external people are able to do. In general, as of right now, I would argue if you have them join as into a team, effectively consider them a full member of that team. That doesn't mean they're going to have access to your whole tenant in any way. If you add them into a chat, just a chat, they're only going to have access to that chat. They won't get access to anything else, really. There's some really cool stuff on this, and I actually have a link at the end of this deck. So 2 days ago, if you're listening live, 2 days ago, I co-hosted with AvePoint a whole hour discussion on external access in Teams. So that recording is live, and I have a link to that as well if you want to learn a lot more about it, a lot more of the technical details as well about setting everything up and thinking about it. I think I was an over explanation, but hopefully that helped answer your question. In general, they're a member. If they're a part of a team, consider that they'd be a member, but you can limit some things they can do, such as can they start a new conversation or just reply. And then you could also control, if you wanted to, with the access to SharePoint. But in general, they should have access to the team, to the lowercase team. Good? Any other questions?
All good. No, that's it for
now.
now.
Right.
Thank you, Eric.
Good. All right. Let's keep moving on. So this next thing is something that I can't say I use every day because we don't set these up every day, but they work really well, and they definitely are useful every day. So by default, when you set up a team within Microsoft Teams, it is tied to an Office 365 group, and then you either have people join that team or you invite people to that team, and they have to join that team in order to utilize it. Okay, makes sense, cool. And you can have, I keep forgetting the numbers, I do have a metric, a whole grid at the end on the numbers. It's like 100,000 teams per organization or 500,000, something like that. I always forget that number, I don't need to remember it specifically. But Microsoft announced a while back, and this is all GA now, it's out, that you can create organizational-wide teams. You can create a team that everybody in your organization is automatically joined to. Under the hoods, this is happening as what's called a dynamic group. Basically, everyone is dynamically added to the group automatically. If someone is removed from the organization, they're automatically removed from that group. So some limitations to think of straight off the bat. One is this is only available for organizations that have 5,000 or less people in their organization. So if you have more than 5,000, you're not even going to get the option to do this. This number is actually, my understanding, it's an AD limit. It's how Azure Active Directory pulls things together. That being said, I don't know if this is going to go up. My assumption is that it probably is. Microsoft's going to kind of keep bumping this number up as they can. I just think that they've started out slow. Originally, it was really about 2,500 users. Then they doubled it to 5,000. Don't know. We'll see. Anyhow, so that's something to think about. Also, you can only have 5 org-wide teams per tenant. So those are some limitations to think about. Great. What else? What's the big value here in helping your organization collaborate better? Well, what I think org-wide teams can be really good for is providing a go-to canvas for company news and announcements and what's happening within the organization. The org-wide team is a place where, again, since the whole organization is there, it might be a good substitute or a good component for some of the one-to-many, and you can control this team, so you can control a little bit of who gets to post and who gets to reply and whatnot. This might be a good place for mid-sized organizations where the CEO or the CTO, CFO, CMO, some of the leadership might want to be able to start larger threads or make larger announcements. An org-wide team might be a great place for that. Traditionally, we've been putting that in a SharePoint portal. Totally makes sense. I'm seeing that we can start migrating some of that maybe to teams where we're already living, and then people will instantly get notified that, hey, there's a new notification, there's a new news and announcements. It's not depending upon someone to open a browser and go to the portal and see it. these posts can be automatically pushed into people's activity feeds so that they are notified, hey, there's this big new thing that happened, or we just closed this really great project, we're all excited, and all those cool things. So I think org-wide teams can really provide some helpful pieces there. Something else is, I believe, long-term, we're going to see a lot of what used to be our portals, our SharePoint portals, migrate into Teams, and Teams can provide us that portal experience. And I'm thinking kind of long-term here. I don't think anyone's truly ready for this. I started to see some sessions get proposed that offer this, that how could you host a portal in Teams? But it's something worth thinking about. One of the things that a portal provides so well is basic navigation to get to information, and it creates pages. Totally understand. Well, within Teams, you could basically use your channels and your tabs within channels to provide some of that navigation, and you can have tabs that provide you some of the information you might want on specific pages. As an example, think about having an org-wide team specifically around HR, something we all have to deal with in any organization. And so within HR, you can have multiple channels, and one of those channels can be benefits. And you go into the benefits channel, you can have discussions, more public discussions about benefits, such as, hey, it's open enrollment time. And people could ask general questions around open enrollment, not, hey, what should I do? But they'd be general questions that concerns, hey, the portal's down, or hey, I can't get to that, or what are the major offerings that we have, et cetera. But then you can have tabs within that channel that could then load context-specific information to me. I could have a tab where I can choose what benefit plan that I want, or I can see what 401k plans available, and I can choose the one that makes sense to me, or it can have, because it can have context within these teams. And if anything, these tabs can just load up SharePoint pages or portal pages, and so I can get a very rich environment within Teams. I believe this can really help the communication and collaboration within organizations. I think that this is still newer. I don't think true roadmaps have been really planned on how this can solve every single need, but it's something that I'm definitely interested in. I know that we at Pixmill are doing this. We're moving basically everything. We basically moved everything to Teams, and everything lives within Teams, within chats, within tabs, within files, within notebooks, within wikis and things like that. But org-wide teams can really help larger mid-sized organizations, larger than just a few people, that can automatically include everybody into one team, and those kind of conversations could occur. So super cool. All right, we're getting into some of the features that I really love and I think are just super cool. Okay, so in the left nav bar, you can basically have all these different apps. And by default, you're going to have activity, chat, teams, calendar, calls, and files. And you'll notice in my screenshot, calls isn't there. Calls will be your voice over IP calls. Your Teams administrator can set up what happens on the left-hand nav bar, on that left nav bar. And so what we did is we removed calls because we don't use Teams for voice over IP. But we've added in some other external apps so that we've customized it. And if you wanted to reorder the left-hand nav, totally can. If you want to move chat below Teams, if you don't want chat, you could technically remove it. It would be available still in the little 3 dots. So underneath OneNote in this screenshot, there's actually the more apps kind of thing. So you can get to more apps, and there are more apps there. But we have found that we use OneNote a lot in our organization, and I think this is really helpful. I think a lot of organizations should use OneNote. I think it's a great place to provide a little more structure when you want to maybe write things out, or you want to have shared notes, or you want to start planning out different things. You can create this OneNote. You can tie in the OneNote app directly into the left nav bar, which is what I'm actually recommending you do, but again, this works really well for our organization, and I love it. Or OneNote is automatically available in the more apps as part of the left nav bar. Now, once you click on the OneNote, what happens is OneNote, a context of OneNote, loads within the context of Teams. So it's there, and of course, it's related to you. You can see in the screenshot here, what I have is there's a personal, recent, Teams, personal, recent, and Teams tabs. The About just talks about the app, so you can ignore that. So as soon as I open this app, without loading any other application, I have my personal OneNote available to me. That's coming from my OneDrive, of course. But I have my recent OneNotes that I've recently worked on. So, I recently worked on a webinar planning notebook that we have. And this is relevant to me. So, I mean, if you don't have access to this webinar planning notebook, you, of course, wouldn't see that. You wouldn't have access to it. You wouldn't see it in your recent. This is my recent course driven by Graph. And I can quickly get to the webinar planning notebook or the marketing and sales notebook, because otherwise I would have to have the OneNote application open and I would have to get to it there, or I'd have to go to the browser and I'd have to find it. by integrating apps, third-party apps within Teams itself, you're going to quickly and easily allow your users, including yourself, of course, to access these apps, which I believe strongly then can drive collaboration. So instead of me dreading trying to find that OneNote because I don't know where it is, or having to spend the extra 3 minutes to find it, which, hey, it's context switching in my head. I don't want to have to do that. If you can see the marketing and sales notebook, if Danielle has something that she needs me to work on quickly, she'll be able to maybe message me on Teams and I can click to it, or I know I've got that task. I could just go to the OneNote. I know I recently worked on it in the last X days or whatnot. And if you clicked on the Teams tab, you see your Teams OneNotes that you've been working on as well. I can then quickly get to that OneNote and I can get my job done, and I can then further the collaboration that's happening in our organization and get that back to the next person. And I didn't have to switch contexts. That's what's so important to me. I mean, this one I'm giddy about. The other ones were like obvious. Those were to me like that's the power of Teams. This one though is one of those ones where when you start to see what integrating third-party applications directly into Teams and then putting them on the left nav bar, what they can do and how Teams can then further the your digital workspace. Oh my gosh, just super, super cool. So there's a lot of native third-party apps that you can natively and easily include. If you go to the App Store within Teams, you'll see a bunch. You can build your own. Super cool. So if you have some LOBs that you've got, you can do this as well. And you could really make Teams just be that launch point to all these things. I just, yeah, super cool. Totally excited about the opportunities that integrating apps directly in Teams has to offer. And these can be, desktop applications as well if you wanted. I mean, they could, like, when I click on OneNote, it actually opens up OneNote in the browser for me, which is super cool. You can really just make some just cool stuff happen here when you integrate the third-party apps. Okay.
Hey, Eric, real quick, we had some questions come in.
Okay.
We had a few. Hi there. I'm going to start with the one that's more on topic of what you were just talking about, then I'll jump back a little bit. So the first one that's kind of more on topic of what you're just talking about is customizing the left-hand nav button a global setting or a personal customization. This is from KB. Thank you, KB.
Thank you. Yeah. As far as I've ever seen, it is a global tenant, but it is in the it's in the context of a profile. So in the Teams Administrative Center, so you need to set it up with Teams. There is the there's an apps option, external apps, and within that there is the there's profiles that you can set up so that you can then control what will show up in the left nav. So you can't customize it. As far as I've ever seen, you can't customize it for yourself. That's set up as a policy for your organization at the tenant admin level. If you want to play with this, I should always be starting my sessions with this, but somehow, or I always have a link and I always forget, but you can easily Bing this on Google. I just stole that from someone, I forget who. I think that's the coolest thing. Just Bing it on Google. What you're looking to Bing on Google is Office 365 developer tenant. The idea here is you can get a free Office 365 tenant from Microsoft for 90 days. It gives you all of the, I think it's 25 E5 licenses, so super powerful, and you can play with all the stuff. So your organization doesn't allow you to see what a tenant admin can do, no problem. Go spin up a developer tenant for yourself, and you can then play with this stuff. You can be your own tenant, your own admin of your own little tenant, and you can play with it. And what happens after 90 days is if you've been using it to truly develop, Microsoft will notice that, and they will extend it, actually. I know a lot of us are not developers, so we wouldn't necessarily be using it for development. You could then actually just pay for one license, which I think is actually a pretty good investment. It's something I think you should be going to your organization doing, saying, hey, look, we need to create a developer tenant for our team, for our org, whatever. Let's officially create a small tenant which only has 5 accounts or something, and it's used purely for dog fooding and playing with the features that are out there so that you can see what's possible. That way you can help guide your organization when they say, look, you can't be a Teams tenant admin, a Teams global admin, but you could then lead them down the path and say, okay, here's how you do it. And you'll see it on my tenant, you can see how to do it, and you can then enable it and play with it and all. So yeah, sorry, global Teams admin. So global policy.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Eric. And then I've got two other questions. One about chat privacy and one about search. Do you want to wait for me to ask those?
Let's hit them up.
Excellent. First question from our friend Darlene. Thank you, Darlene, for sending in this first question. Can you discuss chat privacy?
Yeah, and in context of what? So in general, so chat privacy, it's a conversation that happens between that one or more people, and it's private to that person. If it's in a channel, it's that chat within the channel is available to anybody in the team. I don't think you're asking this, but as a quick little extension, we've all been asking for something called private channels, which would give us some privacy within a team. Microsoft has said clearly that that is supposed to be landing at the end of this month. I don't think it will. My expectation is, without any true knowledge, is we're going to see that at Ignite. We'll hear something, but I really don't know. So if they don't have it, they don't announce anything. Don't blame me. This is just me guessing. And that provides some sort of privacy within chat, but I don't think that's quite what you're asking for. If you have a specific follow-up on the chat privacy, please do let me know. While we're waiting potentially for that, let's go to the next question.
Sure, absolutely. This question comes in from Kim. Thank you, Kim, for sending in your question. How do you search for past meetings in Teams?
Oh, wow. Past meetings.
Good question.
I don't have an answer for that. They would be in your calendar, I would think. So they would be there. They should be potentially in your activity feed if the meeting has some sort of chat around it. I don't know. I was thinking you can ask general search. I can answer a general search question. I'm going to have to look that up. A general search question is team search, to me, has something to be desired for. It's actually very powerful, but I want fewer quick clicks. If you go into the Teams search bar at the top, if I want to find somebody, easy. If I want to find a channel, easy. I don't actually go into the chats tab and go into the chat tab and go look for someone I had a chat with. I go search for them. So I need to speak with Danielle. Keep picking on Danielle, head of marketing on my side. I'll just go up into the chat and I'll just type for at Danielle. And it's easier for me to type that and find her there, and that worked great. I know that there's a knowledge sharing channel in SharePoint, in our Teams environment. So I will just go and actually search for knowledge, and the search results are very quick, and it just gets me to the channel. I know it's on the left-hand side. You kind of ignore that. But I just found it's easier to search for things. But I know that 3 months ago, I posted somewhere, maybe 3 months ago, I posted somewhere a really good article to my team on something. That's a little more difficult to search for. So I'll go to search and I'll type in maybe a keyword. It won't show up, so I'll hit return, and I'll get my search result on the left. Drilling down to find out where that is can get a little more difficult. Now, that being said, that's because I'm lazy. When you run a search, you can start to filter it. I know that search was that I made that post in the knowledge sharing channel. I could actually select that in a filter, but it's a couple of clicks, and it's not quite what I was looking for. So in general, search is powerful. I just wish there were fewer clicks there. My hope is that somebody like a third party creates like a search add-in tool. We're not going to do that, so don't expect Pixel to do it. But I would love to see search become a little easier to use, maybe a little more refinable, and possibly that might then help you find past meetings. Yeah. So great question. I wish I had the specific answer for you, and I don't.
Yeah, I was kind of toying around with this on the side while you were answering that question, Eric. And yeah, at this point, it kind of looks like you have to know at least when the meeting took place, and then you could probably find it. You have to know a little bit more to be able to find those meetings.
Yeah.
Hopefully, like Eric said, hopefully that comes up soon.
If you recorded it, it'd be in stream, and you could actually go to stream and search for it there. You could search for the title or something if you record it.
That's true.
But recording, by the way, by default is not on. So you have to purposely record a meeting, and everybody's notified, hey, this is being recorded. So it allows people to jump out if they don't feel comfortable being recorded.
There you go. Darlene did come back. She said, executive asked to make sure their chats are private. So this kind of gets into the private thing you were talking about before, right?
Yeah, they are. So if it's a chat, it's private. I don't know of any way that it would not be private. I don't know how that would get not privatized. But they have to have a chat with somebody and not have a channel-based conversation. So I don't know of a good way to soothe that person's concern on the privacy of it. But it's a chat. It's private. It's only if it's between you and me in a chat, it is private. No one else would really have access to it. And I don't know of any way that they would be able to have access unless they were to break your account and act as you, which that's a different issue. That's a security problem. So I don't know if that really answered the way you wanted. It just is. I don't know a good way to prove that it is, other than it is, and that's Microsoft. I mean, that's how they designed the system.
There you go. And we have one more question come in, another one from KB. KB, thank you for sending in another question. You mentioned Pixelmill not using native calls with Teams and swapping for Jira Cloud. What if enterprise organizations want third-party solution for meetings as well as chat? Can Teams still be a viable / pleasurable end-user experience?
Wow. Oh, interesting.
That's a fun question. Well, good thinking there.
Yeah. Gosh, that would be interesting. It's almost like saying, can we integrate Teams and Slack? Well, yeah, because Teams is effectively replacing Skype for Business. So if you're using voice over IP or you are a Skype user or a Skype house, you're basically going to have to move to Teams. You can still have the app set up. It could still be the digital. Yeah, no, okay. So yes, you could, and you'd be treating Teams almost as a digital workspace tool. I would then argue the organization would go into the app settings in the Teams Global Admin Center, and you would basically remove activity, chat, and Teams from the left nav. So basically, it's no longer a chat platform. It seems weird, but I think you could, and then you could replace it with your apps that made it make sense. I think you've really lost a lot of the value. I would be disappointed, but I can see if you've invested heavily in some other platform, then it might be worth it. I would want to have a discussion with you. I mean, just as off to the side, just kind of talk through the scenario and see if we can help you convince your project sponsors that, yeah, you may have had a legacy platform, but this might be a really good time to move to something that is significantly richer, because if you lose chat and Teams and channels out of Teams, it is a shame. You really are losing a lot of the cool stuff. But hey, voice over IP, totally get that. And you want an app launcher on the left? Yeah, I totally get it. I mean, you could totally do it with Teams, and it would still provide, I think, a lot of value. And it's still wired into everything else. So
definitely. I want to our friend Igor, thank you, Igor, for throwing out this idea. I was thinking about this, and I'm glad someone else said this as well. Going back to chat privacy for a second.
Yeah.
If you have a one-to-one chat,
yep,
and you add someone to, like let's say Eric and I were talking,
yep,
and I wanted to add any of you to our conversation,
yep,
we have the option for you to see what was previously talked about or not. So in that sense, you know, and I don't know if this directly answers any further to the question that Darlene was asking, but if there's something private we were talking about and we added you to the chat, yeah, there's the option to not show them that. Now, I believe once you add someone to a chat, can you remove them at that point, or do you have to start a whole new chat, Eric?
I don't know if you can remove them. They can hang up. I would just say you'd hang up and you'd start a new chat. This is a common scenario, by the way. I'm talking with somebody, and we want to then pull in a third party, or maybe I'm talking to someone else on SLT, and now I want to bring in somebody else who's not. It's often easier to just basically stop the chat and basically recall people. Just start a new call and start a new call and invite the people that you want to invite in, and it starts a whole new context, and that seems to work well. And what happens then is that the chat history is actually relevant to the multiple people that you've brought in. So if I always have a chat with Danielle and Michael and myself, then there's a history on the three of us speaking, and there's in the chat channel, the chat icon on the left, you'd actually see that there's a chat history of Michael, Danielle, and Eric always talking to each other, and there's context of chat to those three people. Okay, in interest of time, I'm going to move forward. I love the questions. Please keep them coming, and what we always like to do is,
we're out of questions at this point.
We like to pull these questions together at the end. We write a post, and we'll get this all out to you shortly as well with some follow-up. So awesome. Okay, so moving forward, files and in the tabs in general within a channel. Now, this is where I think that you can truly take what can happen within a given channel and really elevate it. So some things out of the box. When you create a new team, you always get the general channel, and of course you can then add more channels depending upon your settings. But people can then add more channels. Every single channel is going to have a conversation tab, and it's going to have at least a files tab. That's like the 2 by default. The Files tab is tied directly to the underlying SharePoint site of the Office 365 group in question. The way this is done is on the technical side, in case you do care, and I'll try to keep it at the 100 level, is when you create a new team, you get a SharePoint site with it, and then in the document library that you get within that SharePoint site, every channel you create gets a folder within the document library. So the general channel gets a general folder, the announcements folder gets an announcements folder, etc. And when you click on files within a given channel, you're going to that, you're seeing that folder's worth of content. And then if you wanted to, you could actually open that up in SharePoint. So there's an option there within that given channel to be able to open this in SharePoint, and you'd be driven directly into the library view in SharePoint in a browser of that specific document library that you're looking at. So files is the place to store your files for a given for the given context of what that channel is working with. I mean, this is huge. No longer we don't allow email messages of attachments in our organization anymore. I mean, why would we? Every single document we're creating should be around some sort of project we're working on, internal or external, that would have a channel. You put the document in the proper channel, and that's where it lives. No longer do we have to be saying, wait, what version are you working on? What's going on, etc. As this is backed by a SharePoint, you can have versioning. So you shouldn't have to have version 1, version 2, version 3, version final, real, version final for real, version final, this is really the final, etc. You can maintain, you can leverage SharePoint and what it has to offer. And as you see, I typically am adding multiple ideas to a given slide. Yep, too many things. What I like about files is it's a tab, but you can add more tabs to your channels, and you can start to add in additional things that make sense for that given conversation that channel will be having. So maybe there is a specific SharePoint list or library that's external that you want to talk to, that you want to tie into this. You can do that. Maybe there's a OneNote that have notes specific to what this channel will be talking about. You can totally link into that kind of thing. You can tie into wikis. You can tie into third-party applications. Maybe we use Jira. We use Jira for our task tracking, and maybe there's a specific Jira project that we would like this channel to be able to tie into. You could create that tab, which effectively would load a web page within the context of Teams. But now, instead of having to go to the browser to go find what I'm looking for, I could have all of that embedded directly in that channel. So I know that I'm working on this specific project. I'm trying to build a webinar for this, I'm building the webinar for this webinar here. I could go into the webinar channel. The files are all there. I can have additional resources to enable that. Maybe I need to record my time so we know how long webinars are taking. I can then have a tab which links me over to Jira quickly to have the task so that I can quickly say, yes, it took me 3 hours to put this slide together, or it took me 7 hours to do that, etc. Whatever it is. It's all within the context of this one application. I don't have to keep going to all these different areas. So really cool things that you can get with files, as well as with the tabs within channels that can help empower the collaboration within your organization. A lot of things I'm thinking here is removing context switching, which saves time and effort and energy, as well as stop emailing files. You can put them all in one place and do something. Okay, now we're getting into some not controversial things, but some other things that you may not be thinking about, but I think are super important in collaborating within your organization that Teams offers. And that is the fact that teams within Teams, love it, are powered by Office 365 groups. Now, there's some caveats here. The reason I like this is because Office 365 groups provide all these other things, these other tools natively for you, such as SharePoint and Planner. They give you these tools to be able to do simple project management. They give you tools to store files, to create lists, etc., to be able to collaborate with the people that you need to work with on a given project. The catch is the way that Teams does this is interesting, and I get it, I support it, and I also sometimes want to turn some of this stuff off. In general, Teams uses Office 365 groups just to bring a collection of people together, to have a collection of people to say, these are the people that are involved in that team. Cool. The thing is that from the group perspective, we don't care so much. Like, Teams is doing its own thing with this collection of people. Let it do its thing. Let it use the things that it needs. But from the group exchange perspective, it's not really supposed to be a group that just muddles the pile. So what does all this mean? Well, what this means is, first of all, if you go into Outlook and you go into the groups, you're going to find that by default, any group that was created via Teams, because you created a new team within Teams and obviously created a group, those groups are hidden from the UI in Outlook. Interesting. The reason why, my understanding, is because from the Teams perspective, they didn't want to muddy up the groups that you had over in groups, because that wasn't what Teams was supposed to do. Remember, groups are actually exchange groups. They're built around email. Teams doesn't want you emailing. That's not the point of email. That's not the point of Teams. So when a new group is added via Teams, that group is hidden from the UI by default. You can get to it via SharePoint, but it's hidden by default. Now you can turn it on. You can make it visible. So you could go into groups in Outlook and you could type for a certain team and you would now find it. But you need PowerShell. It's kind of it's a no-no for a lot of people. It's not going to happen. So ways around this. You could actually create a group first, and then you can teamify it. You create a group, then you go into Teams, and when you create a new team, you'd say attach it to a group. Great. Now you've got your group the way you normally would, and it works within Teams. Totally possible. It's up to you. Like, do you care? If you don't care, don't worry about this. This is underlying stuff. The other thing is that when you create an Office 365 group by default, that if you were to email that group, by default, all of the members of that group would get emailed individually. Like the email would get forwarded to them, so they didn't have to check the group email box. They would just get the notification. That's easy to change in the UI. You can turn that on and off. That's a group thing. Teams turns that off by default. Well, that makes sense because Teams doesn't really need the email address. They don't care about the group email address. But maybe you do want it. Now, I went back and forth with my own team. Like, do you actually need this? You probably shouldn't. The point of a team is that point of a Teams team is that you're communicating within Teams. You're communicating within the context of Teams. You're having your chats there. Should you really be emailing your team, like the team, the team group, the team group? No, you probably shouldn't. It's probably not a good idea, but you can. So there's something to think about. You could go into the group in question that was created by Teams. You could actually turn that on so that if you were to email the group, as an example, we have an SLT team, so slt@pixelmail.com. Don't worry, none of you can email it. If I were to email that, if I was to send an email to that, it would only the email would go into slt@pixelmail.com, but it wouldn't be available. No one else would really be notified. You'd actually have to go into the inbox of that to find it, but that inbox is basically hidden from the UI, so that doesn't make much sense. So in fact, if I wanted everybody to get emailed, then I would have to turn that feature on. I'd have to go find the group in the UI. I'd have to go and turn this on. Convoluted, but it's still there, and I still think having the power of SharePoint, Calendar, Planner, all that stuff behind it is very useful, and it can definitely further the collaboration within an organization. Just be aware there's some limitations that you may run into that wait, what's going on here? And there's reasons why it's there. I don't disagree with the reasons. It's just something to think about. Cool. Okay. To me, a lot about collaboration is about breaking down barriers to allow people to collaborate. And one of the barriers I think that's there is when you want to create a new team, you get a blank team. It's just a team. Well, I know that we create new teams all the time for every single marketing initiative we have, every big marketing initiative we have. We're going to create a team because we want to have a bunch of channels around, discussions, we have tabs, we've got things linked up, OneNotes, because we're going to make a big effort on something. So it'd be really nice if I create a new team. I could say, hey, I'd like to create a team that already has a predefined structure. No worries, you got it covered. SharePoint, Microsoft created that within Teams. A couple ways that you could do this, the Teams team, the Microsoft Teams team that creates Teams, which is a valid sentence, the Teams team has created some templating structures for us, and there's a couple ways to do this. One is that Microsoft has created some default templates for us for Teams, particularly around three verticals. That's healthcare, education, and retail. So they've created some Teams templates that we can activate via PowerShell to be able to provision these. You can also use graph and graph calls in order to provision these team templates. That can be a little hard for some people. If you have IT help you, once a team is created, you can create a new team based on an existing team. One of, I think, a good pattern for us is that we create team templates in the sense of you create a team in Teams, you make it private, and you make basically only a certain number of people have access to it. That's not hard to do, and it means that I could create a team that maybe only I have access to. I'm the only owner. I could create a structure with channels, with tabs, with all kinds of cool stuff. Now, I could use that team as a template for another team, all in the UI. I could go and create a new team through the standard UI, and I could say I would like it based off of Eric's template. And only I get to see Eric's template because I'm a member of that private group. And that team would then be used as a template for another team. So that's super cool. You can also just use general graph calls, actually. You could build scripting. You could build provisioning solutions that use graph to provision teams based on templating. The SharePoint P&P, the SharePoint Patterns and Practices group, has built a P&P provisioning engine. They built this provisioning structure that you can use PowerShell as well as code, C# code, to create provisioning solutions. And one of them is that you can build a Teams template within the P&P provisioning so that you can templatize the creation of teams. And where I really think this is going to help your collaboration is lowering the barrier to entry for new teams to get created so that they're pre-structured a way that fits maybe your governance policies that can help then further the communication and collaboration within your organization. Whoops, there we go. All right, so there's something that everything you've seen so far, I use a lot. The Teams templates I only use when I need to create a new team. Shifts is something that is available, and I think that we might be using it more in Pixelmill. But anyhow, what this is an app that I think can really help organizations that have frontline workers in particular to be able to communicate and collaborate better, where you've got these frontline workers and potentially managers that have to come up with schedules of who's going to be around when, and what shifts are available that need to be filled, or if someone needs to swap a shift. They have this, and this allows particularly your frontline workers to be able to collaborate with each other on helping deliver what it is that they need to deliver. So I think this is pretty cool. It's an app that's available for you directly within Teams. It's there. Something else you can think about, though, is maybe not where you've got frontline workers, but where maybe you just need to make sure shifts are covered in general, even if you're all like more FTE kind of positions. But you want to make sure that people are doing certain things, or maybe you want to track on vacation, things like that. You could look to use shifts a little differently. And we're investigating that at Pixelmill, and I think it could be kind of cool and interesting. But anyhow, for those of you with frontline workers, shifts might really help you create a collaboration platform for your frontline workers and their managers to be able to ensure that, those specific jobs get covered. We're getting down. This is actually, I believe, the 10th now if you've been counting. It's the 9th or 10th. Okay, so what this one is really cool, what I want to talk about here is managing governance around when you're creating your teams using external components to do it. And what I'm trying to get at here is, similar to Teams templates, one of the barriers to collaboration is when people do things wrong. Maybe they set things up wrong and they're not following the same pattern every time. And so what you may want to do is limit who gets to add what into teams. And what you can do is basically turn off new team creation to a subset of users. So if anybody now wants to create a team, maybe there's an org-wide team that has a channel about working with teams. And in that channel, there might be a tab that is driven by a Power App that allows you to request if you'd like a new team created. You fill out a form in the Power App using Flow and SharePoint. That can go into a SharePoint list, and you can now have an approval process to say, should this team get created? It could get pushed in using Flow. You can push in a chat message into a channel. Maybe there's the Teams admin channel that says, hey, so-and-so has requested a team be created. Here's the information in an adaptive card, and then they can go ahead and create it. So there's some really cool things you can do here that I consider this still out of the box, in particular with Power Apps and Flow, because those are with your E3, E5 licenses, your G something licenses. You can create Power Apps and Flow to enable processes at no extra cost, really, except time to put them together, to help build provisioning solutions that will help ensure the governance of your organization so that the patterns that you've required are in fact followed, that I believe will quickly break down barriers on why are different channels different, why are they not put together. It breaks down that barrier. So I know when I want to collaborate on something, a structure is being followed. I can go and find it easily. I know that this is the way we're going to do it. There's a OneNote for this kind of thing. My training can be specific to how we're supposed to collaborate here, and using these provisioning solutions might really help you there. There we go. That was the 10th. And now here's your bonus. I just had to fit in another one. I didn't have a choice. Another thing that I really like about Teams and why I think it's going to help with collaboration, and we're getting sort of off to the edges, but this is super important to me, is that Teams itself, the application, is driven by the feature requests and by the community. Microsoft is listening to us. They want to build us a platform that makes the most sense to us. And we have a voice in this. There's something called user voice for a lot of Microsoft products. In particular, there's one, microsoft.teams.uservoice.com. Anybody in the world can submit something they want changed or added or removed or updated in Teams. Now what happens is other people can vote on that, and Microsoft is listening. I can guarantee you this. They track this, they know this. The catch to this is that it is vote based. So if you have a great idea that no one else cares about, or you can't help get the votes to get it up there, it probably won't go anywhere. So Microsoft is looking at solving the biggest problems that most people have. And if you go to this, you'll find that support for private channels is by far the most requested feature, and Microsoft has heard us loud and clear, and they're working on it. So I think this is really important for us to be able to build that we're working with a platform that Microsoft is working with us on. So I know we're kind of running low on time, so I wanted to hit some high value scenarios, sort of bringing this all together in case you still need some convincing. I have the slide here. You can go and get to my resource where I got this from, but I do want to hit some of the big ones I think here are super cool and what this means. Teams can help this collaboration in your organization for some ideas such as customer support. So a bunch of people are taking in calls, they're solving solutions. They can be using Teams and channels within Teams to be able to communicate with each other and to be able to store conversations that might have occurred, including solutions that might have occurred. So if things happen, or maybe I was off a shift and I come back in, and I can then find out through the customer support channel that, hey, this question came in and this is how it was solved. I now know that, and Teams can provide that. Marketing, keep using that one as my example. And this one we absolutely use. We use Teams for a lot, but we use it for marketing for sure, where we can collaborate on the marketing initiatives. And we've got the channels to have the communications. We can then have the voice chat, the recorded conversations when we want to record and remember what we might have said verbally or via video. We also have that location for files, the Adobe files that we're going to have, the Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, etc., that we might have to be able to create the marketing material. All could be stored within this one spot, and we know it's there. It's great, totally cool. Sales, another huge one, easy. Every prospect might have a channel, and you have all your communication around that prospect there. You can get answers from people. You can pull in your sales engineers and say, hey, we need questions on this. You can add mention people. It shows up in their activity feed, so they don't have to follow it all the time. They'll be notified when they're needed. Super, super cool, low-hanging fruit scenarios that you can build with Teams. If you don't know how Teams is going to help you, talk to me, please. I'm sure we can come up with 3 or 4 very easy wins that we can help convince your product sponsors this is something that's going to work. Now, Teams, though, to make it work for any organization, kind of going back to a question we had of, hey, if we're not going to use the chat, can we still do it? There are a lot of other things that Teams can do that can help drive value. And some of this is that reviews. You can use tabs. Teams also integrates with bots as well. Now, that's part really of the chat features, but you can have bots. One that I think is cool, I have no affiliation with them, don't get any referral, is Jane.ai, which really helps pull together some HR components, which I think is super cool. Definitely, you can integrate apps into this, creating that digital canvas for in one spot that I think is really helpful. Having connectors where you can have external applications, say Azure DevOps, when things occur in Azure DevOps, you can get notified in channels automatically that things have occurred, and that happens through connectors. I think it's super cool. And then, of course, you can build custom apps, and we've got we have a webinar on building solutions for Teams. Make it your own. Build your own things that make sense for you. And then we are finishing up here. Extend Teams beyond just you. Work with those external users. And I told you I had this link here at the end. At the bottommost link, just 2 days ago, I co-hosted an hour webinar with AvePoint, and we discussed in great detail external sharing within Teams, the business value of it, and a lot of the things you need to go through. And it is, there's a lot of steps to do it properly, and it is important. If you're going to open up your organization to other people, yeah, you should make sure you do that right. But you do get some pretty good control out of it. On a per team basis, you can add people into teams, but you can also then have chats with kind of most anybody, although there are some limitations around. You could actually just bring in external people within chats. And something to think about, though, I've only alluded to it really, is this whole idea of private chats. The idea here is that within a team, I might want to have a channel that, private channel, excuse me, I might want to have a channel that is only available to a subset of people. There's half the community seems to hate this idea, half the community loves it. I love it. But that being said, it's supposed to come out sometime soon. That being said, by default, this is turned on. Not a good idea. I do have a blog post. Go to ericoverfield.com. I'm pretty sure it's there, maybe blog.pixelmail.com. No, it's at ericoverfield.com. There's a blog post I have where I discuss why you should turn it off by default, even though I want you to eventually turn it back on. So some really super cool stuff there. Last but not least is teams by the numbers. If you want to know some of the basics of what you can do for teams, there it is. So you can have 500,000 teams. I think that should fit most organizations, not everyone, but most organizations. You can have quite a few channels per teams, 5,000 members per team, and some other really cool stuff that you can do there. But I've got resources and links to all of that. We already talked about user voice, so I'm just going to get here and finish up. Basically, we're out of time, and we'll take questions that I didn't get to. We'll be sure to answer them, get a blog post out for you all, sum everything up. But hopefully this helped you find out what you can do with teams to further collaboration. My big takeaway, what I ask for you is to think through how can we further collaboration and communication within organizations by leveraging teams. And what did I gave you 10 pretty good ideas, I think, actually 10 and a half out of 11. Look at the top 5 and consider how can those work for your organization, how could you utilize them. And of course, if you get stuck or you need help, we're here to help you. Fixable.com, ericoverfield.com, find us. And we are definitely happy to talk to you, kind of lay out maybe what we might do if we were in your shoes, or if you need help setting all this up, yeah, we're absolutely here for you and we'd love to talk to you. So with that, I think I'm good. Unless there's any questions we can quickly ask, or Michael, I hand it back to you.
Thank you, sir. Ending right at 12:15. Look at you, right on the dot. There are a couple questions that I think will require longer answers. So Greg and KB,
we'll get to
keep an eye out for our recap.
Yes.
I will make sure Eric answers those questions. If he doesn't, I'll dock his pay. There are a couple other questions that I can answer quickly. Greg also asked, will Eric's slide deck be shared with participants? Those hyperlinks look useful? Yes, we will share his
blog. Yeah, we'll let you know.
Yeah. It'll be on the blog. And then KB also asked, is the external access webinar on our website? It is not on ours. It is on AvPoints, I believe.
Yes, it's on AvPoints.
We will include that. Go ahead, sorry.
So being on Google, AvPoint webinars, and you'll get to their link. It's the 3rd webinar, I believe, and it talks about external sharing. So AvPoint webinars, and they're one of the organizations. I like working with them. They're a good group of people.
Yeah, we will include the link to that one in our blog as well.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's all we have time for. I saw another question came in from Joseph. Joseph, we will answer that question in the recap. Guys, I will try to have that recap up by, we'll say Monday or Tuesday is probably the most realistic time frame. But I will have it up in the next week or so. You guys will get an email about that with all the information. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an amazing session. You guys asked such good questions. Almost had Eric stumped. That's how good they were. So I definitely appreciate that. Our next webinar next month is going to be our annual review of Microsoft Ignite. Eric will be there in a couple weeks, and we'll have some special guests helping review the big event and all the big announcements that come out. Maybe some stuff around Teams will come out. You never know, so you'll want to stay tuned for that. We'll be announcing the other participants, speakers, all that in the coming weeks before that session comes up, so keep an eye out for that. So anyway, again, enough of me blabbing. Thank you so much again for being with us here today. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll see you all down the road.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.